They told me this island held astounding riches. They told me nothing of the dangers I'd encounter there. It's only been a few days since I've been separated from the rest of the party on this island, but already I can feel isolation creeping in on me, like the water laps on its shores. It's like it's developed a mind of its own. It knows what we were here to do. As soon as we set foot to steal its artifacts, lush greeneries turned into archipelagos in an instant. Despite my natural intrepid flair, the environment here has proved to be especially challenging, even for myself. At first it seemed like a simple expedition, but soon it transpired that the island was playing tricks on us, as it seemed we were inexplicably going around in circles. The island's inhabitants don't care, and in my madder moments, I found myself trying to communicate with them. To no avail. Occasionally salvation would come in the form of one of the artifacts I was sent here to seek, but I am afraid such glimmers of hope are too little, too late. Recently, peculiar storms have struck, hindering my chances of rescue. Nevertheless, I cry out for help when I can, but I fear no one will come. The island brags about those it has claimed before, and I fear that I have become its most recent addition. With the land slowly drowning around me, it seems I will die a broken man. Oh!
Ben, are we going to finish the intro?
Yeah, this month I'm reviewing Forbidden Island. It's a co-op game. It's really bumpy. Forbidden Island entices you and up to 3 other adventurers to visit its vast, mystical shores in a bid to gather up 4 very valuable, very mysterious, very colourful artefacts. The only issue with the place that they didn't mention in the travel brochure is, as soon as you get at least 2 people on this island, it slowly starts to sink into the ocean. I mean, look at it. It's falling apart at the seams. This guy just fell off it completely. But that doesn't stop any of you. No, you're incredibly intrepid explorers, and you vow that you're going to find those 4 artifacts before they sink into the ocean and dissolve. On your turn, you can do one of a few things, and you have 3 actions in which to do it. You can do your character's special action, like the pilot itself can just fly to anywhere on the island. So there you go, plonk him there so he has some company. You can go up, down, left, stage left, or stage right. You can shore up a tile if it feels a bit wet. These monochrome tiles are flooding as we speak, so if we just flip that around like that, there we go, everything's cool and dry there. Or you can give someone one of your artifact cards if you're on the same tile as them, and these are important because at the end of it you're going to pick up 2 artifact cards. Oh my goodness, you can hear the island gods calling as we get 4 of them. That's really important, because if you get 4 of those cards, you can sacrifice them in one of the safe little locations on the island, and you can get yourself an artifact, a colourful little artifact that you need to get off the island. And I don't know, there's something really special about these. If you hide them under the table and don't reveal them to the players, once they do a special action, you can gather them up and go, here is your mystical, it does have an official name, but trophy of octopi, and then go, oh cool, that's absolutely wonderful stuff. But they do play an important role. You do need these to win, but little things, I like it. Once you've plucked up your 2 artifact cards, you can set them to one side, and the game can take a turn. Yes, Forbidden Island has its own turn of events. You see, if you pluck up this little tidal rate marker, it's currently pointing at 2, and then you have to draw 2 cards from the flood deck. We pluck that up, we've got Phantom Rock, and we flip that over, and we have the Dunes of Deception, we flip that over. Now, on the other side of those tiles is the monochrome state. That means they're flooded, and if we draw the Dunes of Deception again now that it's flooded, it disappears from the game completely. That's why it's important to shore up, kids, but in this case it's absolutely fine. What we can do is we can just take the pilot over to the left, we can shore up Falls at Landing, which is important because that's our only way off the island, and we can shore up the Coral Palace, which is again important. It's one of the places we need to get those artefacts from. So we then draw 2 artifact cards up again, and oh, for fuck! These little sods are hidden in the artifact deck like rusty stabs in the back, and when you draw one of these, everyone stops and everyone groans and hits their head collectively on the table. So firstly, what you have to do is move the tidal marker up 1, which now means we have to draw 3 cards when the flood deck comes in, and all the cards we've drawn previously from the deck have to be shuffled up in a rather poor manner, again, sorry, stage fright, and then placed on top of the flood deck like that, which means we're going to uncover them as time goes. Wait a minute. Aha! Yes, if you've had a look at my previous review for Pandemic, you'll realise there are a lot of similarities between this game and that one. In fact, both are designed by co-op connoisseur Matt McGough, and quite frankly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the guys hit upon a formula that clearly works for co-op games, and thankfully, Forbidden Island has a completely different way of ramping up the tension in comparison to its inject-em-up sibling. Okay, so here's how you die in Forbidden Island. Firstly, if you draw too many of the Water's Rise cards, and the tidal marker moves over to the skull and crossbones, pirates come and kill you. Secondly, if Fool's Landing floods and disappears, you lose the game because that's your only means of getting off the island. Thirdly, if 2 places where you can retrieve artifacts from flood and disappear and you still haven't got it, you lose down to stubbornness. And finally, if the area around someone completely floods and disappears, and they can't swim off of it, they're stranded and you all lose out of complete loss. It's really cool because you've got this ongoing timer going on with the entire thing as it slowly slips away. You can feel the tension ramping up as the tides lap at your feet. And you'll soon realise that if somebody's about to become stranded or really needs to grab something before the game ends, you're going to form a line of special abilities in order to try and ramp them straight out in the neck of time. And its best, Forbidden Island is just pure contained camaraderie in a tin. At its worst though, it's just a barrel of contained woe. Okay, so Forbidden Island's got a lot of cool things going for it. It's got the multiple difficulty levels on the tidalometer, which you can set before the game even starts, and brings you 1 step closer to death the higher you go right from the offset. That's something entirely you control. You've got the various different roles players can undertake, such as giving players 1 card wherever they are on the island, shoring up 2 tiles for 1 action, moving and shoring up diagonally. These are all different things that everyone can get and can really personalise a game. And speaking of personalisation, as the island itself is entirely modular in components, it means that every game that you start up is completely different in of itself, and that in effect seems to vary the difficulty from each and every game. For instance, you can have Fool's Landing right off the corner and everyone start in the other side of the island entirely, and that in itself can force players to faceplant the table before they even begin the game. The issue is, even though there's such vast arrays of variety in Forbidden Island, it can sometimes get a tad predictable. Okay, so Forbidden Island has a lot of traditional co-op staples in it. It's got the various roles, and the modular design means that you can sit down to a different game every time. That's pretty cool. But for a game that prides itself on variety, I can't help but feel Forbidden Island fits a very similar pattern over a few games, and you will notice it. You see, 3 actions for every player just isn't enough for them to do what they want to do, and that's good in some aspects. I mean, you want to ramp up the tension in some way, but it's also not enough for them to feel at all useful. You see, the problem is there's a lot of waiting in Forbidden Island. You're often waiting for the right cards to come up, you're often waiting for other players to get to you, and as a consequence you're often just shoring up tiles to delay the inevitable early death. You see, players can't take artifact cards from others. They often have to give them to other players on the same tile, so you usually waiting for the two most useful people to meet up at a point and then trade cards, and then waiting for another correct card to come up so they can actually do something to progress the game, whilst other players are just shoring up tiles. Usually the next action is a constant no-brainer. Now compare this to Pandemic, where you have an entire globe where things go dramatically wrong in various different ways, and you're often splitting up and reconverging the entire team to sort out different problems at the same time. When you win at Pandemic, you feel great, but when you lose, you also feel, I don't know, in a macabre way, slightly good, because you could have done something completely different. There are so many choices that you could have taken that could have saved the world, and you didn't take them, and you just want to fire up another game. When you win in Forbidden Island, I mean, you do feel good, but when you lose, you ultimately feel a little bit hollow. Now, I'm not saying Forbidden Island is a bad game, not at all. When it gets it right, it hits exactly the right note of what an optimal co-op game should feel like. It's just that, well, it can feel a little bit heartless. When the cards don't come out the right way, then it means that it can snuff out all glimmers of hope, even halfway through the game, meaning the endgame becomes an annoying trudge of despair when you know the odds are entirely stacked against you. Even when all hell on earth is breaking out in Pandemic, there are a number of variables you can affect throughout the entire game that can mean you're just one step ahead or one step behind the main enemy. In fact, the fact that I keep mentioning Pandemic means you should probably just put 20 quid on that, or Forbidden Island's sexier sibling, Forbidden Desert. Does that mean we have to do a new intro?
Probably.
Forbidden Desert forces you and up to 4 others to cooperate together when your tiny expedition ship crash lands in the middle of a foreboding desert, sending pieces of it flying about the place. And we can already see some parallels between this and No-Go Island. The environment itself is of modular design. The locations look like artwork seen in a game of Myst. They look absolutely beautiful, and you have a similar bevy of explorers that can each utilise their own individual skills in order to survive. However, Forbidden Desert poses entirely new threats to players, and even though it follows a similar blueprint as Forbidden Island, presents an entirely new identity completely. Rather than picking up valuable artefacts in Forbidden Desert, you'll be picking up parts of your ship in a frantic bid to try and get off the island before it swallows you in grainicles. Hardened by their adventures on Forbidden Island, the explorers now have 4 actions, and what they want to aim to do is excavate the land itself to show these locations that show whether on the X or Y axis the chosen artifact they need is on. Once they've got one on the X and Y axis, you measure up the tiles and you put the artifact on there, and there it will remain for the rest of the game for you to walk on over and snatch up to become part of your ship. However, the game will always take a turn. You've noticed this weird gap in the middle? No, it's not a sarlacc pit. This is a sandstorm, and after every turn it's going to be on the move. You'll draw cards like this to show tiles that need movement, and those tiles are going to move into the empty pit to show movement of the sandstorm. So we're going to move that one and that one, and those will get sand markers on them, such as this. And this presents a massive issue. The environment is constantly ever changing and being coated in these sand markers. One is absolutely fine, you can clear that off with one action, but if they're covered in 2, you're blocked. You can't move that way. Well, the climber can, he's got his extra special ability, which means he can get over it, but no one else can, and they're all screwed. To go along with the game, you've got a little storm tracker that will show exactly how deep you are in it as time goes on. And there's a whole flipping deck of these storm cards that you have to cycle through before the end of the game, and even when the deck runs out, you then have to refresh them to force the storm to be constantly moving and constantly up against you all the time. And they're not the only dangers in that deck of cards. You've got a storm picks up card, which means the tracker will go up one, meaning you'll have to draw more cards each turn over time. You've also got the horrible sun beat down card. Now this means that you'll lose water on every turn that you draw that card. And if even one of you dehydrates and runs out of water, you all lose the game once again. Mourner's loss. The odds are heavily stacked up against you in this game, but it does show glimmers of hope. For every negative Forbidden Desert tries to force upon your team, it feels like there's a positive that the team can utilise at the right time to bat it out of the way. Say a player excavates a tile here and boohoo, it doesn't show them the location of a ship part. Well, that means they can equip an item that can be used at any time during their turn. That could be a lifesaver. Say for instance, Black desperately needs some water. Green over here can utilise the tunnels to fast travel to another tunnel. Go over to him and give him one of his waters for free. Sure, he'll be down one, but he's not going to die. And say on the next turn, they just move to the tunnel and the sun beats down. Well, that's good timing because they don't waste that water. And they're also providing shelter from the sun itself. Say Red needs to head over to the south, but there's a massive bunch of sand markers here. And they can lose if they run out of sand markers as the desert gets engulfed in sand. But not to worry. If he uses a Doom Blaster at the right time, they're all returned to the box, leaving free travel down there. And oh, hang on, we've got a location of a ship out. There we go. There's always a slight glimmer of hope in this game. There's always the possibility that you can overcome anything the desert can throw in your face. And then of course, the desert reminds you, well, it's just going to move. It's just going to move around entirely, and you know. That ship part's now going to be covered in dust and what else, because it's just moved around. It's still going to be next to you, but you know, now it's got 3 sand marks on it, because haha, screw you. You see, this is why my preference lies with Forbidden Desert. You can't wait for adventure to come to you. You have to go to it or it will sod off completely. This constant ever-changing environment means that Plan B may not guarantee success. There's a good chance you'll need a full alphabet of plans in order to get through this. And yet it constantly juggles in difficulty. There are times where you'll feel completely useless, and yet one team member with genius item utilisation will be able to ease up the game entirely and make your end goal of leaving the island seem actually quite probable. But then of course the odd storm card will inevitably block up your team, and then it's left to another team member to feel incredibly useful and save the day. And this is what I love about Forbidden Desert. It knows exactly how to flirt with your hope glands without revealing anything at all, the sly little bugger. Hopefully I've made my preferences incredibly clear when it comes to both games, but upon reflection, I'm not entirely sure you should even care about what I think. You see, the publishers of both Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert, Games Right, focus more of their attentions on younger gamers, bringing them into the fold of tabletop gaming. So really what we have to ask is, are these games good for kids? And to come up with an answer, I devised a little experiment.
I headed into the darkest alleys of town where the youth folk hang out last night and left both games there to see which one would garner enough attention. When I came back an hour later, both had mysteriously vanished.
So there we have it. Whilst it may not necessarily be worth the loss of £40 to come to that conclusion, it is nevertheless a conclusion. Whilst one game is clearly kind of better than the other one, both games hold enough charm to draw younger players into its grasp, and both are extraordinarily good examples of introductions into cooperative gaming. Join me next month when I return to the alley to leave behind, I don't know, a nail bomb for the little shit.